Hi, Erin.
Hi, Dr. Traylor.
I'm excited about having you in our block this semester. I know that in our last group session last week that we had a conversation about sexual identity and sexual issues related to one of our clients, and I overheard you. Well, not overheard. I was there. I heard you say that you want to be referred to as mixture, and I Googled the word and I did all of this stuff, and nothing really came up. And so I'm wondering, is that a word that you just created out of thin air as a way to be referenced to?
No, it's actually a word that I learned I study transgender issues, and I'm
So you're transgendered.
Yes, I
Okay.
identify as genderqueer.
Okay, all right.
So I have a couple other friends who identify the same way, and they weren't really comfortable being called ma'am or sir, so they told me that they had found a word, mixture, and it's like abbreviated MX, so it looks kind of like MR or MRS.
Right,
And so I like that as a word because a lot of people don't know how to just not say ma'am and just call me by my name or not say anything.
right.
So I tell that to people who really feel like they need to say something so that it's something that I'm comfortable with.
Okay. I just, so I'm hearing it's a real word.
It's a real word.
And it has real meaning.
It might not necessarily be in the dictionary, but it's a real word. A lot of language that has come up recently isn't necessarily in the dictionary, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not a real word.
Okay.
Because it does have a meaning, and it has a meaning for a lot of people.
But for a very small subpopulation.
Well, yeah.
So how is that going to work in our supervision?
Well, in an instance where you feel like you would call me ma'am, I would prefer that you call me mixture instead.
Okay. I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
I'm not as hung up on, gender identity and all of that sort of thing. But I do tend to think of traditional, homosexuality, heterosexuality, bisexuality, and and with transgender, because isn't there the thing where it's, you have your birth, you have whatever your genitalia is, and then you have what you believe you are. That kind of all runs together, doesn't it?
Not necessarily. So your genitalia is your biological sex.
Okay.
And that can be male, female, or an intersex person if there's ambiguous genitalia or
Right.
other disorders of sex characteristics.
Right.
Your gender identity, the person that you believe that you are, is your maleness or feminineness or a mixture of the two, or there are people who identify as agender who feel that they're outside of maleness and femaleness. So for me, I identify as genderqueer. I feel like I'm a mixture of maleness and femaleness. I guess a word that would work, an older word that would be in the dictionary is androgynous.
Okay.
So does that work? Does that make more sense?
It does make more sense. So how is that going to affect us in block, and how is that going to affect you with clients, and because not everyone is going to be open and receptive to this.
I know. I don't identify my gender to clients. I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Okay.
At least not at Murney. Maybe when I have my own practice, when I'm established, I would do that. But for here, I don't like to do that. But for the people in block, I'm okay with outing myself and talking about my gender identity on a one-to-one basis, not necessarily in the block, because I don't like to be show and tell.
Okay. So do you approach, do you look for sexual themes and sexuality in your therapy sessions? Do you think in our individual sessions that that's going to be the primary topic of discussion every week? Where do you think that is?
I wouldn't necessarily look for that any more than any other theme. I mean, if that was the presenting issue, then I would focus on it. But for a lot of people, that isn't. So that would just be a theme just like anything else. if a person came in and they were having marriage issues, I wouldn't look at them and say, well, you're probably in the closet, any more than I would say, well, you're probably an alcoholic.
But you might be thinking that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I try not to be biased.
But by saying the word try, I'm wondering if that bias doesn't creep in from time to time.
I think bias creeps into everyone's practice from time to time.
Okay.
Like you've talked about how you're a person of faith, so your faith might creep in from time to time, even in a couple that doesn't identify in any religious way.
That's true. I will give you that. So, I guess what I'm really concerned about as we move forward through the semester is that I really don't want the whole gender issue, the whole sexual issue, I don't want that to become problematic with you, with me, with the other members in block. And to be real honest with you, no one prior to you has ever self-disclosed as being mixture or transgendered. And that may be, they may have thought that was just a private issue between them and whoever. I may have supervised previous people who were transgendered, but typically other people have always disclosed as gay, straight, and that's basically been it.
Okay.
So this is a whole new realm, and I don't want it to become problematic with you as a supervisee, with me as a supervisor, or the other members in block.
I would like it to just be a non-issue. I mean, it's a non-issue for anyone else to be their gender, so I would prefer that it doesn't become an issue. As for sexual orientation, that's very different from gender identity. You said that you've had supervisees who've been gay and straight. Well, they also have a gender. I have a gender and I have a sexual orientation. Those are two very different things.
Okay.
You can't really smash them together.
All right. So how would I unsmash them?
Well, I feel comfortable identifying that I'm a genderqueer person and I'm also a person who's bisexual.
Okay.
That's my sexual orientation.
Okay.
And that doesn't have to do with my gender identity. That's different.
But I haven't heard you use the word female in any regard.
What does that have to do with it?
But isn't that your birth sex?
Yes. But I don't identify as like a woman.
Okay.
That, like, your gender would be like, I identify as a woman, a female person. I'm biologically female,
Okay.
but my gender identity isn't a female gender identity. It's more androgynous, like I had said before.
Okay. All right. I'm just hoping that we'll have a good experience.
I hope so too.
Okay. And it's going to be new for me. And how has your other supervisors, here's what I really want to say is that we were talking a minute ago about it being a non-issue. My perspective is that when you made the comment, I want to be called mixture, you already made it an issue.
I made it an issue?
That's kind of what I feel like, rather than just, I think because you brought it into the room.
Okay. Imagine if you had a client not a client, okay, maybe a client. You have a client whose birth name is William, but they prefer to be called Billy. Does them wanting to be called Billy become an issue?
No, but your name isn't Mixter,
No.
and you're not being asked to be called Mix.
No, I was just trying to make an example.
Okay. And so I'm wondering, because like I said, my perspective is that by you, bringing it into the room, that you have made it an issue. And I'm not sure what other things are going to be brought into the supervisory room, either as a group or individually, that is going to continue to make it an issue.
I don't think it's going to be an issue, but I'm sorry if you feel that way.
I just have concerns. Well, And I guess, what was it about what we were talking about that you felt like you needed to disclose that to the group?
Well, in the context, and it was like last week, I think.
Yeah.
Somebody had called me ma'am, and I typically when that happens, I just tell them I would prefer that you don't call me ma'am. I would prefer you to call me Mixter if you feel like you need to call me something. So I was just telling them, the person, that they had misgendered me and that I would prefer to be called something else.
But couldn't you have just said, I really don't like to be called ma'am?
I've tried that, and it doesn't really work.
It doesn't have that punch for you, does it?
I guess not. It's just people seem to need some word there. So
Is it some people need the word there, or you need the word there?
I don't necessarily need to be called anything, but being down here, like I grew up in Illinois,
Okay.
and people weren't as formal, but down here in southern Missouri, they're much more formal, and there's a lot of ma'ams and sirs.
That's right.
So I've kind of adapted to that and understood that people need to say things like "thank you, ma'am" or "thank you, sir." So having the word "mixter" instead of "ma'am" or "sir" helps the person to be able to say something still, and helps me feel comfortable with what they're saying.
Okay. As a future psychologist, do you not recognize that there are going to be lots of opportunities, lots of times when you're going to be uncomfortable about what is happening to you personally as a professional?
Oh, I know I'm going to be uncomfortable because people have like a dichotomous understanding of gender. People think that all the people in the world are either male or female, and there's really not an ingrained understanding that that isn't necessarily so. So I know that people are going to call me ma'am and miss, probably for the rest of my life. But the people that are important to me and that I have to interact with a lot, I prefer to correct them early on so that we all have a good experience together.
And I think that you used a very interesting word, that you feel like you need to correct them.
Yeah. Because calling me ma'am isn't correct.
But what about the individuals in block last week who you corrected? What if they're not feeling comfortable about having been corrected?
Well, then I'd like to talk to them about why they feel uncomfortable and help alleviate that if I can. Maybe
Okay.
correct isn't the best word.
What other word would you use?
I'm not sure at the
Okay.
moment.
All right. Well, I really do hope that that we will have a good relationship with each other. I'm not sure that we're getting off to the greatest start, but I do trust your skills, and I've had good reports from other supervisors about your work, and so, sometimes getting the hard stuff out is the best way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted us to be sure that your sexual identity, your sexual nomenclature is not gonna be, again, what I call an issue.
I really hope it's not. I just hope it becomes a thing like anything else.
Okay.